Now, you want to see an example of what the local papers are trying to reproduce for people who are already inundated with this shit? Here it is. Here's an example. The Atlantic, by way of MSN. Listen to this. In the war in Ukraine is the end of a world. This was on the front page of Drudge Report. I went there to see if there's any paranormal news that just popped up, and I said, what the hell is this? I clicked it, and it's the Atlantic. That's what gets featured at the top of Drudge. That's why I don't go there anymore, except for today. The war in Ukraine is the end of a world. A world, not the world. The war in Ukraine is the final shovel of dirt on the grave of any optimism about the world order that was born with the fall of Soviet communism, which the Atlantic is very, very concerned about. That's what this is about. Soviet communism is coming back, ladies and gentlemen. Anyone who is still referring to the Ruskies as commies are just fucking, they need to go get their operating system upgraded. You have to find new things to criticize. You got to stop with the commie shit. But you see, this is all that they have. They're trying to pull on. They know that there's only old people reading The Atlantic and MSN. They know that they still have a lot of knee-jerk Cold War inclinations programmed, hardwired inside of them, and that's what they're trying to pull on out. Now we are faced with the long grind of defeating Moscow's armies and eventually rebuilding a better world. What the ever-loving fuck? We're faced with the long grind of defeating Moscow's armies? No, we're not. That doesn't have to be us. Why? Why are we doing that? Before we return to Ukraine, here are a few of today's stories from the Atlantic. Oh, and let's see. There's the puzzling gap between how old you are and how old you think you are. Okay, so bullshit. The second link is when a Christian revival goes viral. Okay, I understand where that is. That's going to be the cautionary tale. That'll be a cautionary tale about letting a nation being caught in Christianity's grip. Because, they spend too much time neutering Christianity with lesbian deacons and everything else. They don't want to give up any gains that they've already they've taken in. And then the invisible victims of American anti-Semitism. Another piece about the walking the minefield of anti-Semitism. So that's how this Atlantic article starts off. Before we return to how we now must defeat Moscow's armies and rebuild a better world, let me remind you about bullshit article, Christian fear-mongering about a Christian revival, how that'll be the worst thing for the world. I'm certain of it. And the invisible victims of anti-Semitism. What a horrible, horrible line of work this is. Now they're back to Ukraine. And Tom Nichols, his name is, opens up with this. Today I grieve. Oh no, Tom, are you okay? Somebody check in on Tom. He's grieving today. Today marks a year since Russian President Vladimir Putin embarked on his mad quest to capture Ukraine and conjure into existence some sort of mutant Soviet Christian Slavic empire in Europe. There you go. There you go. All their fears in one. On this grim anniversary, I will leave the political and strategic retrospectives to others. Instead, I want to share a more personal grief about the passing of the hopes so many of us had for a better world at the end of the 20th century. The first half of my life was dominated by the Cold War. We understand. You're stuck in the past on that one. I grew up next to a nuclear bomb base in Massachusetts. I studied Russian and Soviet affairs in college and graduate school. I first visited the Soviet Union when I was 22. I was 28 years... I wonder who he voted for. I wonder who he voted for in the last couple of cycles. That's what I'd like to know. He's so upset about the Pinkos. About the Reds. This guy is a bone. He's a much darker shade than pink. I wonder who he's talking about. The Russians and oh my gosh. I first visited the Soviet Union when I was 22. I was 28 years old when the Berlin Wall fell. I turned 31 a few weeks before the Soviet flag was lowered for the first time. Oh, it goes on. It goes on. We don't have to do this together. We really don't have to. But it's the whole point here. The whole point is how it's been put out there. The war in Ukraine is the end of a world. For sure, it's the end of a world. It's the challenging of a certain world. You know, NATO had 12 founding members at the end of the 40s, like 1950, 1949. 12 founding members. Today, it is 30. We joke about there being over 100. I joked about Russia being a part of NATO. Today, there's over 30, all expanding eastward. The only thing that's growing, the only thing that's expanding, the only thing that's gobbling up land and accumulating military power. In the combined military forces of NATO countries, we're talking about 6.2 million man military. A 6.2 million man military. All right, as far as manpower goes and expansionist activity. So Russia pushes back against a NATO CIA activity in a non-NATO border nation. And this is the end of a world, and we now face a long grind of defeating Moscow's armies and eventually rebuilding a better world. Well, what's going to be left of the world? There's definitely going to be a lot of rebuilding that has to be done if that's really the path that Tom Nichols thinks that we should be on. And I hope that Tom Nichols gets his old crusty ass over to Ukraine and get himself on the front lines. That's what I really hope. People like Tom Nichols, he and all of his friends should go to Ukraine, get on the front lines immediately with your AR-15s, because we know that they're weapons of war. They're weapons of war that need to be off the streets over here in America, and they will definitely take down. We should send all of the liberals who think that this is a great idea, this war, and their neocon friends, and take all the AR-15s, the weapons of war they say, that are plaguing our streets, and get on out there and easily defeat the Russians with those AR-15s. You must. You must. They're pretty much BB guns compared to what they're using, real weapons of war. But go ahead, defeat them. That's what I say. But it's an inverted world. This is what I'm saying. This is an inverted world, and we have come to expect this. We've come to expect this. Now, it's all nonsense. But you see, this is their fear. This is what they're pushing constantly. But it sets me up for another bit that I wanted to discuss with you tonight. As far as it goes for real news, as far as it goes for news that we have seen really good, authentic output, some integrity, and a lot more results. I got this email sent to me, and